Welcome to the Sharpe Way Show. Yes, it is 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So what does that mean? You got to look at my handsome mug yet again. I'm here this awesome Wednesday evening. Look, I need you to do me one small favor. Now, only one favor. It's not a big one. I need you to get out right now and follow me on Twitter. Head over to @SharpeWay and follow me on Twitter. Why are you still looking at me? Go right now and follow me on Twitter. It does matter. I need people to see me because I need you to like, comment, and share so that people know this is going on, so that people can see that there is other things going on besides just watching CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. There's cool things like this on. So please like, comment, and share. Tonight, I am very lucky. I am happy. I have someone running for president of the United States in a, I guess, a third party, or maybe a fourth or fifth, or maybe the coolest party there is. Who knows? But so I'm running for president right now with the American Solidarity Party. Did I say that right?
You did.
The man himself, Brian Carroll. Brian, how are you, sir?
I am fine, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
I'm glad. I have to ask the crazy question that I'm sure everyone is going to ask you. You know, not being part of the duopoly of the two giants that have been dominating our politics for who knows how many decades, why in the world would you decide to run for president?
Well, it was a process. The first process was saying goodbye to the duopoly. I had been a Republican for 35 years because of abortion primarily. And then slowly I began to rethink some things. Mm-hmm. In 2010, in California, the Republicans ran a pro-choice person for governor. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, okay, if both parties are going to be pro-choice, I can start looking at some other things as well.
Sure. And
I wound up voting for Jerry Brown, the Democrat.
Okay. Got it.
And then throughout the Obama years, I was really frustrated that the Ryan McConnell Republicans, all they could do was say no. They couldn't offer anything constructive.
Right.
And so I was ripe. And when 2016 came along and I saw both choices, both Republican and Democratic choices, and I said, this year's a lost cause.
Got it.
And it's time to start looking forward to 2018, 2020 and build something new. And within a few weeks of looking, I found the American Solidarity Party. Got involved in helping to establish it in California. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have to run for something. You have to run candidates. So I looked around and said, what could I run for? I'm in Devin Nunes' district, so he was an obvious target.
Sure.
Got into that race. And even before that race really started, I realized that in running against Nunes, I was setting myself up to be a fairly obvious choice for the party to run for president in 2020.
You were setting yourself up. It makes sense.
Right. Not intentionally. That wasn't my goal. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But I realized that was going to happen. And so I had about a year to pray about it. And I had some objections, some reasons not to do it. And one at a time, they got kicked out from underneath me. And so I finally said, all right, I'll run.
So you brought up the pro-life issue, and you're someone who your platform is on what you call whole life. Tell me what whole life is about.
One of the weaknesses that pro-life movements sometimes get is it gets called pro-birth.
Okay.
Get the baby born, and then we don't care about him anymore.
I heard that yesterday, actually. Yep.
And we don't take that route.
Okay.
We say we are pro-life from the womb to the tomb. We are opposed to euthanasia. We're opposed to capital punishment. We want to see laws changed so that it is less of a fearsome thing to deliver a baby. Right now a woman becomes pregnant and she looks at the cost of childcare. She looks at the cost of medical. A lot of times she doesn't have medical through her employer, and just the fear factor.
This is a different way of looking at it, because you see many people who are pro-life are Republican. Not all, but many are. And many Republicans are not only pro-life, but they're also pro-death penalty. So I think you're right. This is a different way of looking at it. So it's actually someone who's saying, we are pro-life, but we're also pro-birth, and we're pro-life, and we're anti-death penalty and anti-euthanasia. All of those things combined.
Right. And I should point out, pro-life is not just Republicans. There are 21 million pro-life Democrats.
Sure.
And they are feeling like they are being expelled from their party right now. They're very unhappy about that.
Well, libertarians too. There's a chunk of libertarians who are also pro-life, and many of them feel like that the party is so pro-choice that there's no room for them to be in the party. I think some of them do feel that. I think it's true. There is an issue with that emotionally. But isn't there also another issue where you have the duopoly not actually trying to solve the problem in any way, shape, or form? Instead, happy that there is a pro-life, pro-choice battle, so that now a candidate can simply say, well, I'm pro-life and therefore Democrats vote for me. Republicans vote for me, or I'm pro-choice and therefore Democrats vote for me, even if I'm a terrible person and I have, no value to your constituents whatsoever.
It's worse than that, because for the Republicans who raise an enormous amount of money with pro-life requests, and if they actually solved the problem, they would no longer have that issue as a money-making campaign. And
so it's actually money-making too.
The Wall Street wing of the Republican Party does not have enough votes to get elected. They have to have pro-life votes to get elected.
Got it.
And so they make pro-life pitches. They occasionally toss the pro-life movement some kind of little tidbit. But you'll notice that when Trump appointed Supreme Court justices, which was his campaign thing, Kavanaugh was much stronger pro-business than he was pro-life.
Okay, I hadn't thought of that.
And so the pro-life movement is being suckered along for our votes, but they can't afford to really give us what we want, because then they lose us. We can go find other issues to work on.
You've literally said they can't afford to. I've never heard it put that way before. You're saying that literally they'll lose money if they actually try to solve this problem.
Well, money and votes.
And votes.
There simply aren't enough Wall Street Republicans to elect Wall Street Republicans to office. They have to have our votes.
So I think there's a part that I think is similar or close to it, but it's more personal. You were a missionary.
Yes.
And you went to South America, is that correct?
Colombia. I was in Colombia for 9 years.
Why?
Well,
that's a long time to go away, and it's a very different country.
Well, it was a delightful experience, actually. But back about 1980, my wife and I had been married 7 years at that point, and we were growing spiritually, and in the process of other things we were doing, we heard about an organization, Wycliffe Bible Translators, that was translating the Bible into languages that had never been written down before. And the process is complicated. It's got you have to invent the alphabet for those languages, and they've never been written down before. They don't have any kind of grammars.
Sure.
Those kinds of things, those all have to be created. It's a very slow process. And as a result, there are families with the kids they're growing up on the mission field, and so they have schools.
Got it.
We were in Colombia, a little mission community called Loma Linda. The K through 12 school had between 65 and 75 students, and my wife and I are both school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went down
Makes sense.
really on a 2-year commitment, and we were having so much fun. We wound up, well, we stayed 5, came back for 2, and then went back for another 4.
Wow.
And it was a great place to raise kids. Our own kids became out of it much richer for the experience. And so it was an amazing experience.
Why? So, wow. So you went there, you came back, and then went back again.
Mm-hmm.
You must have still friends and acquaintances still in Colombia now.
You know what? There were people that when we went down there, we were cut off from the larger world. They were back in remote corners.
Oh, I see.
And now they're my Facebook friends.
There we go.
The world has changed so fast
mm-hmm.
in 40 years. It spins your head. But yeah, I still have friends down there, and we can communicate back and forth on the web. And yeah, very enriching experience.
So I want to then head back to the whole life concept. I've got some people who are asking questions about this. One person says, pro-life, pro-choice, government should have no say. What's your view on that? I think most Americans don't believe that. Most Americans believe that government should have a say in this. Libertarians obviously don't, but most Americans do. Where do you sit on this?
Well, I think if you look at the spectrum, you've got a group of maybe 15 to 20% of the Democratic Party who say, any abortion, anytime, and government should pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got probably 60% of the population in the middle that has some kind of a mixed view.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the far pro-life wing, you've got another 20% or so who don't believe that abortion is appropriate anytime for any reason. And I'm in that last group. And I believe that the first job of government is to protect the most innocent who can't protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the unborn baby, you can't get any more innocent than an unborn baby. To me, social justice means those of us who have voice and who have privilege use the voice and privilege for the benefit of those who have none. And no one is more voiceless than the unborn baby. No privileges, no ability for self-defense. And both
your talk, I mean, your view is obviously more of a conservative view, but the way you're talking actually more like a Democrat. Like the language you're using, the rhetoric you're using is much more about caring, and which is much more of a Democratic type of rhetoric, right? You're actually speaking more of a Democratic rhetoric about a more Republican normally issue. It's a different way of looking at it. Does that mean that you feel that things like Obamacare is a good idea, Medicare for all is a good idea? Does it mean you go down that road also, or no?
I do believe that we should have healthcare for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think the healthcare system we have right now was kind of patched together without anybody really designing the whole thing. It was, it was decided in conference someplace, and the Republicans refused to show up for the discussion, so they had no part in it. And so it's a patchwork system, and like many patchwork systems, it doesn't really help anybody. And so I think we can do much better as a country with a healthcare system that kind of starts from scratch. We have what we have now is not working. It is extremely inefficient. I think one area.
So hold on. Does that mean you think, in your view, that we should kind of reboot to have a more privatized style? Is it a hybrid model? Should we reboot with a more government modeled style, like a European style? I get the reboot. I agree with you on that. I think most people would agree that's got to reboot. My question is, in your perfect world, if you could reboot it, right? If you had the power, just reboot it, what would it look like?
Well, I don't think it's moral to have people making profit off of other people's misery.
Okay.
And we have a system now that traps a lot of people in a miserable system.
Very true.
Lots of people simply don't have it. They cannot get it. They don't have, 80% of our hourly workers in like fast foods don't even have a paid day off if they're sick. Well, we have a system where if you have money, you have good health care.
Yes, that's true. I live in New York City. I see it.
If you don't have it, you're simply out of luck. Mm-hmm. And other countries are able to offer better care across the whole economic spectrum and spend less of the gross national product to do so. Mm-hmm. Libertarians who want less government, I think what we want is appropriate government.
Okay.
There are some things that government does better than business.
Okay.
And I think healthcare is going to be one of those. My own case.
Isn't there a worry, though? And this is sort of, to me, I'm a veteran. Government healthcare is the VA system. The VA system, not a great system. I mean, there's some gems in the VA. There are a couple of them. You can find them throughout the country. But generally speaking, most veterans are unhappy with the system. Most are. Unless you have a simple where, I broke my leg, fix my leg. General rule, VA is good at that. As a general rule, they're good at that. But anything deeper than broke my leg, fix my leg, VA falls down constantly. And you look at the suicide rate among veterans, it's twice that at least of non-veterans. My worry, and most libertarians' worry, is going to be, you're going to wind up giving VA to everybody. That's our worry.
That would not be acceptable. But I have some experience both with the Colombian medical system. Mm-hmm. Two of my grandchildren were born under a Brazilian medical system.
Oh, okay.
And 3 of my grandchildren were born in England under the English system. And so I have some personal observations of the different systems. And I think the British system works.
Okay.
And we have so much inefficiency in our system. I mean, the argument in favor of business doing it is that they're supposed to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. And that's baloney. They are not.
Okay.
For example, my wife and I, both of us school teachers, we were working for the same school district, mm-hmm. which meant that
this is in Colombia or here in America?
Here in California.
Okay.
We were covered under the same healthcare policy through our school district.
Yeah.
Good insurance. And it was set up so that I was the primary on mine and she was the secondary and vice versa, mm-hmm. which meant that we were paying, the school was paying double for us for the same amount of insurance.
Ah, I see.
And then we would get every week 6 or 8 things in the mail. The company was trying to figure out who was going to cover this and who was going to cover that.
Ah, I see.
Same mm-hmm. company.
Mm-hmm.
But they've got somebody sitting there at a desk churning out these letters. And then we would have to take them and call the company. And
sure. The system's a disaster. I've seen it. It's horrible.
Incredible inefficiency.
Okay.
But if you have a system, single payer, you don't have to quibble about who's going to pay for it.
Okay.
I saw a study that said we would eliminate $360 billion of that kind of duplicative paperwork by going to single payer. Well, let's use the $360 billion to hire doctors and nurses instead of paper pushers.
So, I mean, you're giving me a different picture of your party, right? You give me a picture that mm-hmm. says, on this side, we kind of are closer to Republicans. On this side, we're kind of close to Democrats. This side, we're kind of both. So are there any niches that people just come to you? Like, do you know that, this voter looks at you and goes, Carroll, that's my guy. Is there a group of people who do that?
Well, you can't nail everybody that comes to us. We're getting some pro-life Democrats. We're getting some Republicans that are fed up with kids being in cages at the border. We're getting those kinds of, and I'm sure the libertarians like us are getting voters who are just saying, the duopoly is not working. It's time to kill the two major parties and start over again. We share that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have a lot of people, and I think probably the libertarians agree with us on this. We want to see ranked choice voting.
Yes, absolutely. Same page there for sure.
Yeah, we may be opposite on a few things, but we have a lot in common.
Absolutely.
And so people are coming to us looking for something new. They're saying what we have right now is not acceptable. We have to start over with something new. And as they look around, our party is fairly closely aligned to Catholic social teaching.
Sure.
I'm evangelical. But when I joined the party, or actually when I was looking and found the platform, I didn't realize it was Catholic social teaching. I just looked down the platform and said, yes, 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 yes. So we have a lot of following there. We also have.
I like where you're going with this. So let me ask you on a personal note: is there a policy that you think is like really, two or three of them, even just a couple policies that to you personally, these are the ones that you think you want to enact, right? Do you have a couple of policies that are your gems, or one or two or whatever it might be? Do you have any?
So many of the things that I'm talking about have to be attacked at several fronts at the same time.
Absolutely.
And for example, you can't have the kind of abortion policies that I want to have without the healthcare. And to me, abortion is not healthcare, but you need to have a system for paying the bills for a pregnancy, so that a woman who is pregnant and fearful of not being able to pay her bills has that fear put to rest.
When I was running for governor, I had brought up many of these issues. I brought up the idea that in New York State, I think recently it's changed, but surrogacy was against the law in New York State. So if you were pregnant and you could find a family that was happy to pay your bills and take your baby when your baby was born, it was against the law in New York State. In many states, like 8 or 9 states, it was against the law. Adoption is insanely hard, right? In many states. New York State is one of the worst. So I was even talking about putting money into artificial wombs, even to make that the next step, right? To do all those things to try to make it to where that a woman would make a better choice. That's always been my view. So I see kind of where you're going. We're in the same area there.
Yeah, I'm gonna draw the line at artificial wombs.
Please tell me.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of that, but definitely making it easier for adoption. Right now, or at least last I looked, the federal government did give an adoption allowance on income tax. But let's say that you spent $30,000 on the adoption, you could write it off on the following year's income tax, but you still have to wait, half a year or a year, whatever it is, to get the money back. And when you need the money is when that baby is first in your home.
Right. Sure. Yes.
So those kinds of things can be done, but it's a big picture thing. You have to work on all of them because they all fit together. You can't have one without the other. And
the sad part is, Brian, only guys like us who are actually running in third party, actually trying to solve things, actually speak the way you're speaking. We don't just say, I've got a bumper sticker saying that will fix everything, right? Build the wall and immigration solved, right? That's it, right? We just do one thing and magically everything's done, versus instead realizing that this is not only is it multiple areas, it's also a cultural change. It's us thinking differently about parts of our world. So let me go to something that's hit us this year, COVID.
Mm-hmm.
If I know who you are, my gut tells me that you're torn on the response, right? I'm sure there's part of you that's saying, gotta save lives. And I'm sure part of you saying, but freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, that matters too. There's got to be a push-pull, or am I wrong?
No, you're right. Anybody who's all one way or the other is not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
There are enormous numbers of people hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And, my wife and I are actually very comfortable in our quarantine. We enjoy each other. But you have a lot of frustrated people locked up at home. So you've got more domestic violence.
Yes.
You've got more suicides. You've got all kinds of things. You can't simply go into it with a simplistic, this is an easy answer. There are no good answers. There were some bad answers along the way.
Yes, there were.
We had under the Obama administration, we had a guy in China whose job was to watch for this kind of thing, to see it coming and warn us. And Trump brought him home. So we didn't have anybody there to see it. And again, the Obama administration left Trump with a playbook. And if an epidemic hits, this is what you do. And it was ignored. And our current president has a very low opinion of science. And so, he was laying off the science advisors and things like that. So there were a lot of mistakes early on that could have been avoided. But in a situation like this, you can't have a worldwide pandemic without some discomfort. There is going to be discomfort. But you can try and make it as fair as possible. The payments that were made, which were, small business was what they were described as.
They weren't.
Well, first of all, the United States government defines small business as a company with less than 500 workers.
Right. Yes.
And to me, a small business is the guy who's got a pizza parlor at the corner. He's got some high school kids who work for him in the evenings.
Yep.
That's a small business. It's the guy who's got a mechanic shop and he has 3 mechanics and a secretary.
Yep.
That's a small business.
Yes.
And we have completely missed that. We targeted, and even with the 500, Planned Parenthood got a bunch of it.
Yes.
That's ridiculous. So we need to focus on helping the people who need it most. We closed down the small shops and left the big box stores open.
Absolutely.
That's ridiculous. We need to go the other way. We need to encourage the small guy, and we failed.
So let me walk down that road for a second. What I'm hearing is your economic policy, if I hear it right, and obviously correct me if I'm off, is that you are trying to promote the small business owner, the entrepreneur. So does that mean you're the typical, cut regulation, or is it, give out money to small businesses or tax cuts, or where do you stand on supporting those small pizzerias and mechanic shops?
Right now, the playing field is tilted so that all the money runs down to the big box places. And we can tilt it the other way so that more of it runs down to this end.
Okay.
We can, for example, encourage, we have a whole generation, the boomer generation is retiring and turning their businesses over to somebody.
Yes.
The choice is they can sell out to the big guys, to the conglomerates.
And many are.
Or we can give them tax advantages to have their employees form a co-op.
Okay. I thought you were going to go into some way of making it easy to transfer to family. You gave me a left turn there. Okay, good. Keep going. This is good.
There's lots of ways to encourage the small businesses. and of course, one of them is you don't favor the big guys.
Okay.
You give advantages to entrepreneurs just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I know a guy. He's 30,
Mm-hmm.
and he's still not able to really get started in his life.
I know that. Yes.
I've known him 20 years. He would make a great barber. He would like
Okay.
to be a barber. But before he could be a barber, he's got to come up with $5,000 to go to barber school.
You're lucky. New York State, 20,000.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes, you're lucky. 20,000. Yes.
but there are vested interests who don't want to see a lot of independent barbers.
Absolutely.
And the law is stacked in favor of those vested interests.
So you're talking about licensing and things of that sort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's dozens of different things that are keeping young entrepreneurs from getting started.
Mm-hmm.
There are dozens of different things. Well, for example, our system right now, we manufacture stuff in central China.
Mm-hmm.
It is transported to the coast and put on a boat and brought to the United States, and then shipped all over the country on taxpayer-supported highways.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the damage done to the highways is by heavy trucks.
Right. Yes.
Automobiles do not damage our roads as much.
Mm-hmm.
But the Walmarts and the other big boys who are taking advantage of that are not paying for the damage that they're doing to the highways.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Which means they can have lower prices, which puts the guy on the corner out of business.
Right.
And where he had a nice business going and could employ several people, now he's in a position where he has to go to Walmart and get a low-paying job.
Right. Or he used to own the pizzeria. Now he has to sell to a franchise. So now he works for Domino's or Pizza Hut or something like that.
Right. And our system of law encourages that. We need to change the laws to discourage it. Tilt the field back in the favor of the smaller guys. For example,
so hold on. I want to go to what you talk about, the roads and such. It's an infrastructure question. Does that mean you're okay with the idea that maybe you could use some of those, companies like the Walmarts or the McDonald's to kind of sponsor some of those roads, right? To put their dollars into that road so that small business could still use it. But since they're using it mostly, they sponsor this and it lowers our tax burden. Is that an idea that you'd be open to or no?
I would be willing to look at some numbers on that. Sure.
Okay. Because that was one of the ideas that we brought up in Libertarian Party, is a way of not having the government have to foot that bill at all, right? Let the bigger company that has a bigger marketing budget sponsor that, and everyone gets to use it, and they get the sponsoring.
Well, that's a thought, yeah.
So I'm glad you brought up, that whole economic issue of the small business owner. What do you feel? I know in California it's been a very big deal. The idea of the AB5, right? The idea of turning turning gig economy employees, those employees who are contractors or they work, just for a short gig and go someplace else, or Uber drivers, things like that. In California, New York, and other states, they've been pushing to make these people physical employees. They're not contractors. You can't have a contract. You can't have a gig economy. It's got to be employer, employee, and that's it. Do you have a view on that?
A lot of people who were doing that were very upset by it. Mm-hmm. It meant that they no longer would have the freedom to choose their own hours sometimes. Mm-hmm. It meant I have a daughter who writes for a NGO.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And she's been writing for them for maybe 12 years.
And she gets paid by how much content she puts out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
And she started that when she was living in California, and then she moved
Mm-hmm.
to another state. And she continued to do that work from the other state. And suddenly, the California law meant that she couldn't work for them anymore.
Right. Yep.
And so I suppose it was well intentioned, but it did a lot of damage. And if they're going to go with that kind of concept, they need to fine tune it.
Yep. Yes.
It was not a good. How they put it in was bad.
Okay. I have a question that's a little bit off, but I just want to ask it. Brian, do you know how many states you will be on the ballot on? Do you know?
The states, many of the states have not yet closed their windows for registering, and they won't announce who's in until they close the window.
Oh, okay.
But we are fairly certain to be on the ballot in Colorado, in Vermont, in Louisiana. We are pretty much guaranteed to be certified writing candidates in California. And I don't remember which we'll be in Tennessee. We're pretty sure we've qualified in Tennessee.
So are we looking like around 20-ish?
We could go over that.
Okay. So maybe
you take the ballot where we're actually on the ballot and the ones where we're certified as writing candidates. We originally thought that between the two, we could get about 40 states. Then COVID hit.
Yep.
And it's so hard to collect signatures.
Absolutely. We're doing it ourselves. Absolutely.
And
yes.
Some of the states did loosen their qualification thresholds. Whereas, for example, in Vermont, where we did not think we would be able to qualify, they changed their rules, and that was the first one where we really got everything together.
Okay, so do you think that it will be physically possible for you to have enough states that we could actually win the election, in theory, if you won every state?
Yes. Obviously, it helps to get the big ones.
Of course. No. I'm just look. I mean in most of the if you're not part of the duopoly, your goal in a national campaign is to be able to physically win, right? I mean, okay, I could physically win this thing. That's of course what you're trying to go for, right? That's what I'm. Yes, of course. So okay, good.
We're still waiting to hear on, for example, Florida. We got our in, and they take some time to go ahead and check your signatures to make sure they're all valid. And
absolutely.
And in New York, the window doesn't close for another month or so, and so we won't know there for a while. Okay. But we know we're on the ballot in Arkansas.
Okay. So you've got a bunch of states.
Pardon?
You've got a bunch of states, and you'll probably be over 20.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I want to go to another piece. I have a question here. Someone asked about how you feel about the bump stock bans. So I kind of want to go to a more broader question in general. When it comes to the Second Amendment, where do you stand on that in general? Are you more towards, let's do registration? Are you more towards red flag laws? Are you more towards nothing at all? Everyone can have, tanks. Where do you kind of go on that spectrum?
On guns, first of all, I have to point out that here I am on my own because the Solidarity Party does not have anything in their platform. Okay. When we wrote our platform, every plank had to have 80% agreement within the party membership, or we left it off. And we simply couldn't get to 80% on anything that we would say on guns. And I think, well, if you look across the country, where would you get 80% of anybody to agree on guns? The whole country is torn up on this one. And so you're not going to get that kind of agreement on any proposal. Okay. So my personal thing is that I don't, no president starts with unlimited capital. You go in and you've got a certain amount of capital and you have to choose where to spend it. And I don't think there's enough consensus in the United States for me to spend very much capital on guns.
Okay.
I would not use an executive order for either way, to move it either direction. I think that's something that Congress ought to do. And the reason Congress can't do it is because there's so much disagreement.
Okay.
And so if Congress got their act together and came up with a compromise that enough people could live with that they could pass it through Congress, I think I would probably sign it.
So again, what you're kind of saying is Second Amendment, you don't have a strong view either way on it. If the Congress comes up with a decent plan, you're good.
Both sides have good arguments.
Mm-hmm.
The defenders of guns have a very valid argument that many times in history, governments that were about to turn repressive confiscated guns. That's true. I accept that argument. And so you don't want to get to a point where a government can simply take over.
Sure.
But on the other hand, we cannot have a system where parents have to worry every day when they send off their kids whether there's going to be a shooting at the school. And so both sides have valid arguments that we have to listen to and try and work through. In my ideal world, the NRA would take the lead on coming up with some kind of a compromise.
I wish that were true. I've been so disappointed with the NRA so many times. I completely agree. The NRA has just become a mouthpiece of the Republican Party.
And vice versa.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very disappointed in what they've become. Absolutely. So let me go down to a more. You brought up school shootings. Let me go into education. Do you have a view on what the federal government should be doing in education? I mean, you're running for a federal post here, right? So is there a view on what the federal government should be doing on education? Is it just enough, leave it alone? Is it too much? Is it not enough? Do we got to change it? What's going on with the federal government in your view when it comes to education?
To education? Well, the federal government's one of the beneficial things they have done is try and equal out the funding.
Okay.
Right now, for example, I taught both the beginning of my career, the first 6 years, and then after I went away and did a bunch of fun stuff, I came back and spent the last 11 years in the same district I started in. Very poor district. Farm workers and
this is rural California?
Rural California. It was actually the village or the little town where John Steinbeck came to research grapes of wrath.
Okay.
And so there's still a few people there, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of that migration from Oklahoma and Arkansas during the Dust Bowl years, mixed with a majority now of families that have come in, even going back to the 1960s, families from Michoacan and Jalisco, Mexico, coming in to work in the fields.
Right.
And
so you think the federal government has done a good job of equaling out the money from those rural areas compared to, say, more suburban or urban areas?
The school district I was in had no tax base.
Oh, okay.
There was no business in town. The farmers were outside town. It was a bedroom community. Very little commerce. For years, there was no grocery store. So there was nothing to tax.
Got it.
And since schools are supported by property taxes primarily, the schools simply didn't have the money to work with.
So you think the federal government stepping in with this problem has made things fairer? Do you think that,
for example, my job, my full salary for 5 or 6 years was paid for from a federal program to reduce class size. So the neighboring districts had 30, 32 kids in a classroom. And the federal government gave my school district a certain amount of money each year as long as they kept the class sizes under 24.
Okay.
My complete salary for a while. And it was very beneficial. Those kids needed it. They needed that extra attention. So where the government is doing that, or I think the biggest single item in the federal education budget is Pell Grants.
Sure.
Those are very beneficial things, and so I wouldn't want to see those eliminated. Unfortunately, they've got the standardized testing binge that they're on. That's not good.
Yep.
And they are imposing their ideas of curriculum and stuff on students. When I started teaching in '77, they gave me a textbook, and pretty much I had freedom. I taught U.S. history, world history. I had the freedom to arrange my own curriculum, decide what was important, and teach. And it could be, there was a time when the teacher in the classroom next to me had very different expertise. She'd been in the Peace Corps, she'd been in Africa. She was very well schooled in feminist theory at that point. I had traveled in Europe.
Very different.
Very different expertise. But the children in each classroom got the benefit of expertise.
Sure. Right.
And then they started saying, okay, you have to teach to this test.
And changed.
And we looked through and said, there was no fair test that would both test what the woman next to me was teaching her classes and I was teaching mine. You could not get a test. And so as a result, we watered down the curriculum.
Wow.
Neither group got the benefit of anybody's expertise, and we taught to the test.
I have to say that again, because that's so critical. I agree so much. There's no way to have a fair test. So you had to water down your curriculum. The kids did not get the benefit of expertise, and everybody suffered on that just so we could have a federal mandate. Yes. Thank you. Yes. I can't stand that. All right. So I appreciate where you are there. Would you be open to an idea to where, states no longer used property tax as a way to fund schools? Is that something you'd be open to, that concept?
If we can find an alternative way to pay for schools, that would definitely benefit the kind of district that I was teaching in.
Okay.
And it would. I don't have as much experience with the big cities, but a lot of times the big cities expanded to the suburbs. The suburbs created their own school districts, and left the inner city school district without any money.
Very true.
Somehow that has to be corrected. And
got it.
And when we're talking recently reparations. Well, what would reparations look like? One of the things reparations would look like would give the inner city schools the money to raise the standard of education for an entire generation of students that are coming up.
So you brought up reparations. Let's go down that road then, right? There's been a big issue with the death of George Floyd, right? And the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd has, sparked so much conversation in our country, to include reparations, Black Lives Matter, all those things, right? Oh, that spurred a lot of that. Where do you stand on those issues? Do you have an opinion on how do we repair? Do we repair?
Well, I think in this particular situation, it's different from when we gave each of the survivors of the Japanese relocation camps. We gave each one a check for a certain amount of money.
Yep.
And that was a situation where we could very easily say, yes, this person was there, and it's not, 3, 4, or 5 generations later.
Right.
But we can definitely say that we have, as a country, mistreated Black America. And we need to do something to repair that.
Okay.
And, very first thing is an apology. We need to face up to the fact that we treated these people poorly, and apologize. Then we need to find ways that we can meet the needs of communities. It might be, for example, making sure that we are changing banking and real estate practices. We, going into the 2007-2008 housing crisis, the Black community had less equity.
Yep.
And in the process of that downturn, they lost a larger percentage of it.
Sure. And so what you're actually saying in reparations is, you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, you're not about writing a check. You're about helping a community to be better and to raise that community up through systematic change, like changing lending, banking rules, mortgage rules, things like that, education, inner city schooling, things like that. So that Black families would be able to build up equity to pass on to their children. Right now, the one of the major handicaps, and I mean, obviously, policing and other things there, but one of the handicaps is the Black community has not been allowed to build up equity that can be passed from generation to generation. And so that has to be changed. In fact, it has worked the other way against them. The Atlantic ran an article not too long ago talking about especially the farmland, I think up through Mississippi and Tennessee along the river there. And at one point, Blacks owned 80% of that farmland. And between government policies and lending policies and things like that, most of that land was wrestled away from them and given to whites. Well, if a law can bring that about, a law should be able to reverse that. Today, only 2% of the farmland in the United States is owned by Blacks. Well, that, farming has been one of their traditional businesses, employments, occupations. And so we need to facilitate them being able to buy more of their own farmland. I get it. Okay. That's a different way of reparation. It's not a check. It's a systematic change to make things better. Is there a time limit in your view on this? Is this 5 years, 10 years, in perpetuity? Is there a time limit in your view?
Well, you definitely would have to monitor. I don't think it's a problem that's going to be solved in 5 years.
Okay. So it's until a certain thing happens, right? Until X thing happens and then it ends. Is that where you're going or no?
It's hard over time to sustain something. If you go back and you look at Reconstruction after the Civil War, there were a bunch of good things started that were, they fell by the wayside. And the real period of progress might have been 8 years or so, maybe less. And so somehow the system has to be set up that it will sustain itself.
Okay. So I want to go so much as I could now. I want to go. Someone asked me about the Supreme Court. If you were, do you have someone in mind who you'd want to be in the Supreme Court?
I think that her last name is Barrett. She was suggested when Kavanaugh was up. She was the preferred choice of the pro-life community.
Okay.
And I think I would have gone with her. Again, I think Kavanaugh was chosen because he was pro-business. And I want to find somebody who is more specifically pro-life. I want to see somebody who goes back to the text of the Constitution. We have a Supreme Court that has been writing legislation because Congress is afraid to do it.
Is it Amy Coney Barrett?
Yes, that's it.
There we go. So someone was paying attention. See, there we go. We put it up there. Perfect. Thank you so much, Edward. I appreciate that. Yes.
I was about to give a different name because I have a friend, Barrett, with a different first name, and that's confusing.
So I see where you're going. You're looking for more of a constitutionalist, someone who's not going to, decide and legislate from the bench. Okay. I want to keep going if I could here. You also do something else, which is not common for someone who deals with more social issues. You also care about the environment. That's also a part of your platform. Now, when it comes to the environment, are you a Green New Deal person? Are you a Paris Accords person? Where do you fall on that?
I definitely would be part of the Paris Accords. I think that we actually ought to be more ambitious set by the Paris Accords. I think the only way we are going to reverse the greenhouse gas problem is to shift from carbon-based and include nuclear. There's room for wind, there's room for solar, but those actually come with some problems. The wind machines break down and then they don't recycle. Right. And the solar panels, they've got a lifespan, and when that's done, they just become waste in landfills. And with the solar, when the sun goes down, you have to fire up a power plant to keep the electricity running overnight, and that's so inefficient that you've lost whatever value there was in the solar.
I'm a big fan of nuclear. I'm with you. I had a guy on last week that talked 2 weeks ago, all about the new Gen 4 nuclear reactors. Absolutely. I'm all for that. So you think that nuclear is part in your world of our environment? That's going to help us tremendously. Your Paris Accords plus nuclear.
I don't see any way to do it without the nuclear. And the technology is there. The biggest problem is that all of our treaties governing how we do nuclear are geared to the previous generation of technology. They don't fit the new technology. And so the first step is to rewrite the regulations to be consistent with the new technology.
Got it. So you're going to change regulations so that people can actually do this?
I'm sorry, what?
You're going to change regulations so that people can actually start doing this, right? We can start building nuclear power plants again. I love it.
I know a fellow who is designing them, and he's having to go to places like Indonesia to try and install it because the more industrialized countries the regulations are so ridiculous.
They can't do it. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, Brian, I got to say, I covered, I think, all the questions I had for you. I appreciate you giving me this hour that we spent together. Is there anything you want to bring up before we wrap this up?
I think it's been a great hour. I'm more than willing to do it again sometime.
I appreciate it. Absolutely. Yes. So for those of you who want more information on Brian, please feel free to head over to either his website. It's Brian Carroll. That's 2 R's, 2 L's .life, or go to his Facebook page, Brian Carroll, ASP for President 2020. He actually will reach out to you. Someone will reach out to you. If you reach out to him, you will get a response from someone, unlike me sometimes. But like him, you will actually get a response. It's not a bad idea. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate all the time. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a great time. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank you, Larry.